Today we're going to take a look at how to make a BOC pocket. One thing I want to get out of the way right away is I have a medical condition that makes me shake now. So no, I'm not this scared of BOCs. First thing you're going to need is a piece of spandex. When you get it, figure out which way the stretch is. It should stretch across its width compared to a little bit in its length. We're going to do all of our markings on the inside of the material. Our first marking is going to be 6 by 17 inches, and I'm going to take a moment just to line this ruler up with the weave. About there. Be careful when you mark it that you don't cause it to pucker, so take a light touch with whatever you're using to mark. I'm using tailor's chalk here as it goes on pretty easy. So there's 6 by 17. Next thing I'm going to put on here is a marker 8.5, which is the center of this piece of fabric. At this point I'd scissor cut this out. To save time, I already did one earlier. Next thing you need is a 7-inch piece of 1-inch elastic. Always give elastic a little stretch before you measure it, just to take any relaxation out of it. On one edge of the elastic, put some double-sided mounting tape close to the edge. And then wrap it over on the other side, same edge. You think I'm shaking now? You should see me thread a needle. That's hysterical. So I've got my 7-inch piece of elastic now, and I've mounted double-sided tape to it. I'm going to line this up now with my center mark, and you notice it'll extend out about a 1/2 inch either side when I mount this. We want it to extend out. And then peel off the other side. We're now going to fold this over so we can get a nice sharp fold onto the spandex. We're going to put that to one side for now. Now cut a piece of Parapack 7 inches by 10 inches. Obviously I'm using different colored materials for the sake of easier to see in the video, but you'll be using hopefully prettier material than this. I'm now going to make a mark 1 inch from one of the 7-inch edges. I also wouldn't normally use a pencil, but I want you to be able to see what's going on. At that 1-inch line, I'm going to line up my spandex and elastic, and if all goes well, the double-sided tape should mount the elastic and spandex to the Parapack. So now I'm ready to cut out my pocket. The finished size of the pocket I'm going to make is 4.5 by 8 3/4. That's kind of a generic size that's pretty good. If you're wondering what this inch is about, we'll talk about that later. So going to take a hot knife, metal set square, and now I've found the use for N95 masks during the corona epidemic, and it's because it really helps with these fumes. I'm going to burn a 9-inch line, I'm going to weld, hot cut a 9-inch line down this material, and what I'm hoping to do is to melt all the layers together. So 2 layers of spandex, layer of elastic, and some Parapack. Make sure that you're on top of all the layers. If you're looking closer, you can see the spandex is offset by about a 1/4 inch now. So take your time and make sure you've got all the layers. This will take a little bit, and it should give off a ton of smoke. And this is why the N95 mask is pretty useful. Now I'm going to mark 4.5 inches on the front side and 8 3/4 on the long side. I'm going to square up a rectangle, if that's even the right way to say it, that again is 4.5 by 8 3/4. Thanks, mate. Put it in the next room, and there's some stuff in your bin. Take it out. You'll see what I mean.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to cut that out. And like I said, I actually want to weld all these layers together. It makes it easier for me to handle the pocket as it goes through a binder. If you make it where it's just spandex, it can be pretty problematic. It can pucker or change shape while you're trying to bind it, and that's never helpful. Let's see if we got it. Alright, take my mask off. So now we've got our pocket, and the next thing we have to do is bind around it. Now I'm assuming most people don't have access to a binding machine. So what I'm going to use today is a 3/4 inch binding attachment that you can put on just about any sewing machine. I have mine mounted on a walking foot. You don't need that, and I'll prove the point later by sewing through this stuff on a single needle drop feed. If you haven't dealt with a binding attachment before, it folds the 3/4 inch tape as it passes through it, and then you can add whatever material you want to be bound so that it gets sewn in at the same time. It's a really nice thing, and I think they're about 45 bucks, so they're within reach. Every binder, and by that I mean the machine and person, has a different technique for turning corners and getting them to look nice. The corners on a binding attachment are not going to look quite as good as the corners you'd get on a binding machine, but do your best still. Alright, I think I've said enough on that. Let's go and do it. So the first thing I do is put my 3/4 inch Type 3 T5038 binding tape into the folder, and I sew off about a couple inches. I then introduce the BOC pocket at this point, so the opposite side to the opening on what will be the bottom edge when we install it. Get it in there, get it under the foot a little bit so it starts feeding. I'm deliberately going slow because I want to get the best out of this, and I don't want to bunch up all that spandex. I'm going to sew to the very edge, and I do mean the very edge of the spandex. Then I'm going to bring the needle all the way to nearly the next back down position and then back it up. So what I just did was put a little bit of slack in the thread, and the feed dog has now descended, so it's a little easier for me to turn this material. I've also pulled it forward about a 32nd of an inch. Look at that for a shake. That was my best one yet. I'll now try and pre-fold that 45-degree angle that I'm looking for on the tape where it turns the corner, and introduce it back to the needle position. There we go. Like I said, it is worth taking your time with to try and get a nice 45-degree fold on it. Now it's easier to bind through the layers of spandex and Parapack than it is to just go through the Parapack layer. The Parapack unfortunately is not very thick and just makes it prone to more shrinkage and dimensional change. Alright, right to the very end again, nearly all the way and back up. Pull it a 32nd of an inch, pop the binding tape up, try and manually make the 45-degree fold as best as you can, in this case with a screwdriver, which I find to be the best tool for the job. Get a few stitches in there, and now I'm going to trim out where I started my binding at so that it's flush with the edge. Now I've just got to bind off on this side. I'm going to bind off a couple inches and we'll trim that out later on. Alright, not bad. I got lucky. My folds are pretty close to 45, so they look okay. I'm pretty happy with that. Now let's go on to a drop feed machine and put the second row of stitching in so that it looks like it was done on a binding machine. So this is your box standard regular drop feed single needle machine, and I'm going to sew relatively close to the edge here, but it's really all about appearances. Don't worry too much about anything else. Need just a half stitch for that one. There we go. Ah, went off one. Never mind. A little more careful this time. And I went off again. So what I'm going to need to do now is take out a couple stitches. That should do us. And then back up about an inch, which you're not going to see on the final installation because I've got to oversew this when I put it on. How's that for a get out of jail free card? There we go. Alright, now we're going to go put some zigzags in over the elastic. You're doing these stitches to anchor the elastic a little better to the pocket, so make sure that I'll just put a mark on it. Make sure that you are in fact going over the elastic. You've only got to go to the edge of it. There we go. I'm going to try and keep it fairly neat, so I'll keep the stitches mostly between the two rows of straight stitch here. After you've started and done 3 stitches, back up 3 stitches. Go to the other side and then back up 3 or 4. Just going to move the needle into the right position, that is right hand side, not correct, just so again I can gauge where I want it in relation to my other 2 rows. About there. So that's all the sewing we have to do on the pocket. Now we've just got to tidy up this end here. So we'll head back to the table. We're going to trim this off at about an inch, which is roughly what we've got left. By hot cutting it, you're going to weld the threads to the binding tape so it's not going to ravel on you. Now I'm going to put a little dab of glue on the back side of that. I'm going to push it all the way in. Gives us a nice bound off edge. There we go. 1 8 3/4 by 4.5 BOC Pocket. Pretty easy to make, and one thing to note at the end, just stretch that elastic a little bit because of the double-sided mounting tape. That's it.